Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining us again. This is possibly the most important conversation in America, at least in my opinion. We are interviewing scholars, professors, writers, thinkers, left, right, center, middle, pro-independence, anti-independence, it doesn't matter. We want to have an intelligent conversation here that we just can't find in the mainstream media. With us today is Joe HOFT, author of The Steal. Joe HOFT is an author and contributor at one of America's largest political websites, The Gateway Pundit. The Gateway Pundit is run by Joe's twin brother and founder, Jim HOFT. Joe's online posts at The Gateway Pundit have been shared around the world by numerous individuals, including President Trump himself. He has also led reporting on the corrupt Mueller gang, COVID-19, and more recently, the 2020 election. Joe HOFT is a radio host at TNT Radio Live, author, former international corporate executive in Hong Kong for a decade, and contributor at The Gateway Pundit since 2016. Joe is the author of 5 books, including his new bestseller, The Steal, Volume 2, The Impossible Occurs, which addresses the stolen 2020 election, and provides an inventory of issues that prove that the 2020 election was uncertifiable and never should have been certified for Joe Biden. Joe has obtained 3 degrees, including an MBA with an emphasis in finance from Iowa State University. He has also obtained several designations, including receiving his CPA and Certified Information Systems Auditor. There's the book, The Steal, The Deep State, Big Tech, Big Media, China, Absentee Ballot, the USPS, Nonprofits, and Rallies. Here's a little bit on The Gateway Pundit. The Gateway Pundit, which started as a tiny opinion blog, saw readership surge to nearly 50 million views a month as it amplified Donald Trump's, what they claim, false stolen election claims. Reuters documented the impact 25 election workers targeted by more than 105 requests for hostile messages citing the Pundit. We're going to get to all that with Joe. Was the introduction okay? There's a little bit of a feedback. How was the introduction? Did I get anything wrong? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, no, thanks. Thanks so much. And thanks for having me. I guess everything else seems pretty straightforward. The Reuters piece, not really thrilled with, but that's the message that they for some reason feel like they have to share. There's this effort out there by a number of entities, many of them paid for by the U.S. government. We're finding out now recently from Twitter and other events that they're being funded by the government, and their effort is to harm, I'd say, conservative media and basically shut it down. They've got one piece we just recently came up with was this Global Disinformation Institute. It's out of the UK. We found out that it's it's in the U.S. It's stated as a nonprofit, but it's really curtailing the nonprofit laws because it's actually says it's located in Texas, and it's really not. And there may be some real problems with this entity, but its whole purpose is to basically blast conservative media, call us hate speech, and then go after and target our advertisers. And this entity is being paid for by, in part, Open Society from George Soros. We also found a couple other instances here recently, one in the House committee where they were reporting on NewsGuard, who's ironically funded by our Department of Defense. Now, you tell me what business they have in basically paying NewsGuard to be a fake fact checker of sites like the Gateway Pundit. And anyways, they are used by Facebook then to censor media, and because it's got an anti-conservative bias, Facebook's been using that entity paid for by the Department of Defense to hurt and harm sites like the Gateway Pundit. So for years, I could get into this right away. I'm jumping way ahead of the.
Well, hold the energy, hold the passion. That's exactly what we want to get into. You're getting into exactly what we want to get into, but I want to make sure that everybody viewing can follow us along. So we're going to get right back to that. Hold the energy, hold the passion. That's where I want to go.
Yeah.
So that everybody can follow us along. Briefly, not super in depth, but briefly. What is the book, The Steal, And why are so many people upset with it? In your opinion, what is the book, and why do you think your critics are so upset with it? Briefly, so that everybody can follow along, and then we'll get into that major meat and potatoes.
Yeah, great. And let me know, who those critics are, because I'm interested. But of course, the Steel is about the 2020 election. It's about those events. This book here was those events leading up to the election. It's setting the stage. There was a number of various things that occurred before the election that are relevant to what happened on election day. So titles are there. Maybe a couple pieces I could just briefly mention from this book. One is we were told by Google, Facebook, and Twitter a month ahead of the election that, hey, you're not going to have the result on election night. It was a concerted effort. Bloomberg, I saw recently a video from some guy from Bloomberg saying the same thing. So there was this message that went out, and this never happened before in U.S. history, right? We knew the winner, except with the exception, I guess, of Florida, a couple minor things, but for the most part, we know who won by usually two at night or whatever, depending on your time zone. True. And for some reason, these geniuses are all in unison started to say, well, we're not going to have an answer. So there's a discussion on that in there. There's a discussion on the media and their bias in there. There's a discussion. One piece that I kind of brought up too, and I'll just I'll maybe finish with this is about the rallies. And that's the last chapter there. Well, I kept track of the attendance at the rallies for both Trump and Biden from Labor Day to Election Day. And in total, President Trump had 1.1 million people at his rallies. And by the way, not a single instance of violence at any event. 1.1 million people, not even a fist fight, no nothing. Not a broken glass, nothing. And big crowds, 60,000 in some arenas and 60,000, I remember, in a field in Pennsylvania, a huge crowd down in Miami. I mean, even after the election, he's had 100,000 out in Texas at one event a year or so ago. So he had tremendous following, and it was a great strategy on his part because the media would suggest that he didn't have any following. So he'd get out there and go around that media and show people that liked him, hey, you're not the only one that likes this guy. Now, on the other hand, you had both Joe Biden, and if you recall, Joe Biden barely made it out of his basement, had some events, had circles on the floor, right?
I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring up 2 points to back you up. I can't take it as stance on this opinion because they're trying to be neutral, but I was going to bring up that it is a historical fact, folks, whether you agree with Joe HOFT or you don't agree with Joe HOFT, or you like the book or you don't. It's a fact that they don't typically say we're not going to know the results of election on election night. That's really bizarre. That's a fact. The other thing that's bizarre is that Biden won the election. That's what they say. But he didn't win any primary until the end. Typically, presidents win a couple primaries. He won none until the very end, and then he got one. That's also highly unusual, and also not campaigning physically during the entire campaign. I can't support the book. I can't disagree with the book, but I am telling everybody those are facts. Those are three really weird things. Fact that happened.
Biden didn't win New Hampshire, and in every other election, the guy who won New Hampshire, at least first or second, is going to go on to the presidency. He got like fifth in New Hampshire. He didn't do well in Vegas, and then in Nevada, and then he went to South Carolina and won that election. Then everybody else dropped out of the election. He won the rest of the primaries and won the Democrat ticket. So it makes you wonder what was done there right around the South Carolina primary to get all his competition to step out and for him to win that election, which was kind of bizarre because he wasn't even. Bernie Sanders was the guy who was winning it at that time.
The Iowa. I'll just invite everybody to look at the Iowa primary. And look up the new app that was invented right before the primary for counting the votes, that was designed by ex-staffers from Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, that malfunctioned the night of the primary vote and couldn't be fixed for 3 days, leading to confusion on if Bernie Sanders won that primary or not. Those are all facts. You want to say he did everything on the other, and there's nothing to it. Okay, that's a fact. That happened. So
I wrote, yeah, I wrote about that in either this book or my next book, which is The Impossible Occurs, where I really got into those events on election day. But this book here, President Trump has wrote me a real nice message saying you did a really great job with this. Hopefully, look forward to look at your next books on this. I've written a second book, and I'm in the process of finishing it with a third book, which is after the election, and it's about really all these efforts, in my belief, to cover up what had just happened. So I guess the final statement here on this book on the rallies is Biden had, according to my estimations, and I kept track in a spreadsheet, a total of less than 2,000 people at all his rallies in the same time period. So you had 1.1 million here, less than 2,000 here, and you're trying to tell us after the election that this guy with less than 2,000 people at his rallies in circles, some empty, he beat the guy with 1.1 million people at his rallies. Just a matter of fact. Nobody has challenged me on those numbers, by the way.
I can't take a stance, but we are covering because we want to be neutral. So let's get to the second point. Why are people upset? Why are people upset about this book? Why are people upset? Why did Reuters say something so mean? Why are they upset? Why are they taking this stance against the book and you?
Well, like I mentioned in the lead here, that we found out recently through Twitter files that the FBI was actually working with Twitter, even had a separate channel with Twitter on how to censor people. I've been censored on Twitter, and I haven't got my account back. Now, what I wrote about when I got first, I guess, suspended was the fact that I put up some posts on Hunter Biden, and this was before the election. And this was my posts were I gained access to the laptop, was given some information, and we put it up the week before the election. Not really dealing with the prior work that was done by New York Post, which was, hey, there's all this money that's flying all over the place. What's going on? My series of posts in right before the election were more of the family and what's going on within the nucleus of this family. And it was very seedy and sick, and I could get into all that. I don't know if you want to even hear it, but I laid it down. And one piece came out recently. We've heard one representative in Congress mention that they have information on Hunter Biden trafficking individuals, human trafficking involving Russians and Ukrainians. Well, one of my posts showed evidence that he was with a Russian in California,
sure,
at a certain period of time, and so we even got a passport to validate it. And
but why the steal? This book, the steal, this concept of the election being stolen. I know a lot of liberals, they're mad. Why are they so upset about this book? What exactly does this book do? Does it represent? It's got so many liberals so upset.
Well, this book really, probably, if they read it, probably wouldn't get them too upset. It's pretty straightforward, and it's about before the election. So not really sure. I guess they are upset about the narrative that the election was stolen. I think there's an effort by the mainstream media to paint Gateway Pundit and I guess anything related as like here, 100 violent threats or hostile messages citing the pundit. Reuters documented. And so I'm not sure what they have there. I don't know where they got it. I don't know what sort of effort they put into validating those numbers. I'd really love to see them. But, this is the kind of stuff that they want to say. There's this effort to associate what I believe the truth with hate speech.
Right.
And if they can label us as hate speech, like I mentioned, this global disinformation outfit out of the UK that's getting funded by our secretary or by our State Department and by George Soros's Open Society, that's there. Its whole purpose seems to be we are going to cut down. We're going to do all we can to shut down this conservative media because it's too. It gives a narrative that they don't want shared. And so that's why there is this effort there to label us as hate speech. And then they have a mechanism in place through Twitter to censor us, through Facebook censor us, and then through our other efforts like this global disinformation outfit to attack our advertisers, all in the name of what they believe to be the right thing to do. So what the result of all this is basically ultimately the end of free speech, which is our First Amendment right, and freedom of the press, First Amendment as well. So when they attack this, rather than attacking the argument, rather than saying, okay, Joe, you laid out here 2,000 people showed up at Biden's events. We've gone through it. We've analyzed it, and it's closer to 3,000. We want to correct you on your number. I don't think anybody's doing that. I haven't had anybody come to me and say, hey, Joe, we don't like it that you said 1.1 million people showed up for Trump. It's actually 2 million, and we think you need to edit that. Nobody shared that with me, period. I think it's more so that these facts that I lay out portray something that they don't want to hear.
So you're not, if I may, so that everybody can follow along, and I apologize, but just so that everyone can follow along, because a lot of people have great information. I'm sorry, let me summarize so that everyone can see where we're going. I think what you're saying is, I wrote a book outlining a lot of bizarre facts, and people have said, well, that's hate speech and you're causing division, but what they won't do is debate the facts I put in the book. Is that a fair summary of what you're saying?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call them bizarre. I think just here's how I look at it. Yeah. So and maybe that's where I could add my background's in for a long part of my career was in auditing. I've overseen the financial process, reporting process for multi-million and billion-dollar entities, and also have overseen auditing teams around the world. I've been either led or been involved in multiple audits around the world, 200-300 audits around the world. So that's my background. Yeah. And anyways, yeah, I'm not sure that last book, The Steal. Yeah.
We can go to this one.
Yeah. See, that one is written by.
Yeah, these are other guys.
Yeah. See, they came in. Here's the unique thing about that book. That book came out right after the election. It says January 4th. The hardcover in 2022. There was one book that came out right after the election, and maybe it's a paperback.
Did they get a call from Trump like you did?
Oh, I didn't get a call from Trump.
Did they get a message from Trump?
Saying, I don't know. I doubt it, because the book that I saw, and I think this is it, came out right after the election, as if. And when you look at it and when you know how much effort it goes into putting a book together, you're almost like they were tipped off and they had to put something together quickly after the election to support the narrative that anybody that says anything about this election not being certifiable, that then we're gonna call them the individuals that are trying to steal the legitimate election that went to Joe Biden. And that's what's going on with one book. I just looking at it, I'm like, how could it have come out so quickly? And so there was another book out there named The Steal. I think that's it.
I'm remembering now. Yes, this is by liberals who were saying that conservatives were trying to steal the election. What I found interesting was you have liberals saying, how dare these conservatives talk about a stolen election? And then they write a book about how conservatives are stealing the election. And I'm like, that's... I don't like when people do X, but then I'm going to do X against them. I'm like, how does that? I'm going to hit you in order to show you that violence is bad. I'm like, what?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so whatever. Why? So obviously you have put an idea out there. They're not challenging the facts with the idea. I remember a time as a boy when you could question things. When you could say, I'm not sure, I'll play along, I'm going to pay my taxes, I'm not going to go grab my gun and revolt, but I have the right to question and to keep questioning and to say I'm not satisfied and to say, I remember my aunt was, Ronald Reagan was on TV and she goes, liar. And I was like shocked. But she goes, in America, we're allowed to call truth to power. Nothing wrong with that. and I still remember that lesson. Why is it so bad to question if an election was legitimate at all? Why is that a horrible thing and
Yeah.
the enemy of America to even question that, in your
Well,
opinion?
I tell you what, it's a great question, and the problem is that and maybe it's more one-sided than that because for example, I saw a Twitter thread yesterday. This guy named Kanakoa the Great. I don't know who he is, but he does a lot of tweets, and I don't go to Twitter a lot, but people usually point me in a direction when there's something out there worth looking at. And this guy had like 15 or so different tweets, each tweet being a report or a video or a discussion by our mainstream media, what I call big media in my book, that is that basically where they were criticizing the election process and especially the machines. And so there was New York Times was in it maybe a couple times, the New Yorker, Salon, Vox, CBS. The list goes on, about 15 different basically recent articles since 2016 where people, these entities, these what I would call far left entities, all criticize the election process, especially in relation to machines. As you know, a couple days ago, Fox News paid Dominion huge amount of money in a defamation case, and I have a number of questions on why they would do such a thing. But the facts are, Fox News is just one of many news media outlets in the U.S. that have challenged these machine companies, and I don't know why they wouldn't use that as one of their arguments.
It is interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about how there's conservative effort to remove conservative media from being able to be viewed. I don't know if that's true or not. We're just here to interview people, but it is interesting that while you're talking about that, there's a lawsuit going on that I know a bunch of liberals are talking about. Oh, this is going to kill Fox, and they are happy to hear that.
Oh yeah,
they are happy to hear
sure.
that. So I'm just facts, folks.
Sure.
Just putting facts out there. Just things I notice. What is it? So let's get to the main question. Is political division real? And what I'd like to ask you is, we're in 2023 and we have liberals saying, hey, it's wrong that these conservatives question our election. This is dangerous to American democracy. But I remember 2016, and all of these liberals said, that's not my president. He wasn't legitimately elected. A foreign government installed him. Now, I think about 6 months ago, we actually had the first definitive scientific study that came out and said, for all the Russian hacking in the election, it maybe shifted the vote 0.01%, less than 1%, basically totally insignificant, meaning Trump was elected normally through a real election. Yet I have yet to hear any liberal say, sorry, guys, we kind of put this out there for years and years and years, and then it turned out to be completely not true. What I do hear liberals saying, and I consider myself a liberal, I just consider myself a liberal with two eyeballs who work. How's that fair to question an election in 2016 and then completely forget that you questioned that election and then blame other people who questioned an election? And does that sound like we're rational people anymore in America?
That's a good question. That's why I think a lot of people too, when you see the policies of this administration that are just, to me, just insane or bizarre, to see these things happen. There's a big movement, even more and more, into the conservative camp. It's amazing because the media is 100%. And I shouldn't say 100%, but the mainstream media, the big media outlets, are all in the pocket, I think, of the left. So it's amazing that we're getting around it. So I think that's why people are after the Gateway Pundit and me and Jim and people that write there, is because we're effective. I just saw a Rasmussen poll from yesterday that says 65% of Americans now believe that January 6th, the FBI instigated January 6th, or that they were definitely in the crowd or a part of it or something like that. So I'm telling you, people are getting the message despite mainstream media not wanting that to be shared. The problem is, and maybe this is it, back in even before 2016, actually, I remember during the Bush years, the media was really hard on Bush. Then
Yep.
Obama came along, and the media couldn't give enough praise for this guy.
Yep.
And then I thought Obama did some things that were really, really bad, giving millions, if not billions, to Iran. I couldn't understand that. Feeding guns to liberals or to rebels in Syria that morphed into ISIS. I didn't understand that. There was foreign policy. The Middle East was on fire, and domestically, our economy was really being challenged. And he put in place some trade. Remember that big was it TPUSA or big trade deal with Asia that wasn't helping the U.S. at all. And so and so so there was we saw with the media there, just this guy could do no wrong, which was really, really kind of scary, because people talk about the fourth estate, which this is right here, having the ability to offer thoughts, and people can let them soak in or not, and or challenge them or not, or refuse to watch or not, but to totally curtail it is not the thing to do. I think, my belief is we need more of the truth. And I think if, I heard a speaker say this back in the 90s, maybe say, if we were just, all given the truth, decisions would be a lot easier. There wouldn't be this stuff going back and forth. And that's probably the basis behind these people, the GDI or whoever, who are trying to cut down on conservatives. They believe they own the truth. And my understanding is absolutely not. They're not even close. And so that's the challenge, getting information out. Maybe as mankind or the world will never agree on what we believe to be the truth. But we can certainly, I think the magic of this country for years was the fact that regardless, you wouldn't prevent somebody from sharing their message. You may not agree with it, but you wouldn't do that. And I think lately, with the censorship through big tech, which is this new thing really over the last 20 years that's really pushed information on American people through our media channels, and even like cable news, it just really came out in the 90s, I believe.
Right.
There's just a lot of new technology that is able to feed us all sorts of information. And so it's important that this information be free and uncluttered. But some of these people that claim to be that way, I don't think they are.
Let me ask you, I think you said this, I want to be clear. I think what you're saying is there's an effect to try to deplatform people. It has been exacerbated by big tech censorship. We've never seen anything on this scale trying to remove whole platforms ever in American history. Of course, there was disagreement. Of course, there was name calling, but there was not an attempt to remove your ability to speak completely. This seems relatively new. Is removing the ability to have someone speak relatively new in your opinion? Is it a scary new phenomenon? Do you see it going away? And is this part of the reason why maybe political division is a lot worse?
I can remember reading a story about the right before the Civil War. There was a guy in Alton, Illinois, which is on the Illinois side of St. Louis, who had a printing press. And a group of people grabbed that printing press and threw it in the river. And the people that threw it in the river were pro-slavery. This guy was anti-slavery. And I think eventually, maybe the second time, I think they just killed him as well. And so it's not the first time that people are upset about information. I remember George Washington during his presidency. I read a book. They came out with it, and maybe it came out during Adams' presidency, this law where they wanted to curtail this information they thought was false. And so they put in this law, and it actually backfired. It hurt them. And then people that took over the government, like Thomas Jefferson, who was really one of the targets of this law, basically came to power. So maybe that's what we see in history, is that whenever there's an effort to try to curtail information, maybe that vacuum actually sucks in more people than it does prevents people from actually seeing the information. Jim shared this once in a speech. He received an award out in DC, and I thought it was pretty profound. It was about during the Cold War and how the U.S. had Radio Free Europe, and they would send messages in the native language to these people on the radio in their country, and the Russians would go in and jam the channel. So they would change the channel, and people would always go there. They would search for the channel, they'd find it, and this process went on, I guess, throughout the day or whatnot. And the message was people will search for the truth, and that's maybe human nature. I think good people do that, and I think ultimately, probably, we all want to be for the most part. I think really most people are really, really good people, and most of us, for the most part, want to know the truth, and we will work for it. And so that's why conservative media on the internet's doing well, because it's where you can go to get information today.
There's certainly you're absolutely right. There is a history of the ability to share information coming out and people being upset. The Luddites of, I think, ancient Europe, early medieval Europe, where they didn't like manufactured cotton printing, and so they destroyed it. There's also the Gutenberg printing press. The Catholic Church freaked out over that because the Gutenberg printing press was making people free and actually had different countries break off from their order. Can we fix political division? In the examples you were talking about, things, they kind of got over it and then it went better. Do you see things improving? For me, trying to deplatform people is new and scary, and I don't see a waning of interest in doing that on top of so many other polarizing events. Do you see polarization in America getting better? Do you see it getting worse, or do you not know?
Well, I see it right now as getting worse. I mean, under the Biden administration, I mean, God, you had Biden get up and give a talk in red, just where there was raging talk, calling MAGA people just, violent, bad people. And it was like, no, MAGA itself means let's make America great again. Well, who doesn't want that? Who wouldn't want that? Who doesn't want to make this country great? And so, no, I don't think right now we're getting the only place we can be saved right now is through the courts, and some of the courts we're not getting fair judgments. But we're gonna, I think people are gonna keep fighting, and I think ultimately the truth will win, as it always has.
You're right. So Joe Biden gave a speech in front of a blood red backdrop with 2 active duty Marines. That almost never happens, where he appeared to say that 78 million Americans were enemies of the state. It was so egregious that it scared independents and Democrats, not just Republicans, who said, damn, maybe that's causing a lot of division and isn't what we need. Before that, you had January 6th. A lot of people thought that was divisive. Before that, you had Donald Trump. You had Colin. So we're not acknowledging an election in 2016. We're not acknowledging an election in 2020. We have people storming the White House, or Americans thinking that the White House was stormed. We have presidents calling out 78 million Americans as enemies. How does this get better at all?
Well, I think, it's a good question. I think eventually the truth will win. I think that's it. You can't break the truth. So it's going to get out. It's going to creep out. It's going to come out. You can't stop it. It's the truth. I think we need to all just, stand up and continue to share the truth and encourage people to, produce and follow the publishers, et cetera, that are sharing the truth. I think that happens. I think that just happens. Like I mentioned back in George or John Adams' time. People aren't going to take kindly to censorship, and especially in the U.S. I think a lot of people agree that that's really, really fundamental to this country, and one of the many reasons why it's just been so fantastic over the years.
Let me try to summarize what I think you're saying. One day, liberals are going to learn that they've been misled, and they're going to go, you know what, we need to stop censorship, and we need to stop cancel culture, and we need to stop removing people for hate speech. Is that the theory that you're saying, how we come back together, is that people on the left realize they've been lied to, and then eventually they go, oh, we got it wrong, and now we can coalesce under some sort of general understanding as Americans?
I think so. Or what's going to happen is there'll just be fewer people on the left. Because I think Americans are good people. I fundamentally believe this country's full of really, really good people, and they will morph towards the truth and for justice. And those that are pushing, just like this speech that you mentioned here with Biden, like you said, even Democrats were saying this is bogus. And I've talked to people that come out and say, I didn't vote for Trump, but this stuff that I'm seeing going on now, this is outrageous. So,
what if that doesn't happen? What if, okay, but let's say you get a couple liberals. You took 10% of the liberals. Hey, pretty good. But there's so many of them, they outweigh conservatives in election after election. And then we have presidents, hey, we popularly elected this president, but we didn't get him because the Electoral College. What if liberals never come around? I mean, I'm not trying to be super negative, but I'm also saying they've been lied to, right? If we're going with this mechanism that liberals have been lied to, that's going on 10 years. That's going on, all this polarized language and misleading, at least since 2016. We're in 2023. We're pushing a decade. How do we know that they wake up?
No, I just think fundamentally that's the way we're developed. I just think that. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, let me show you a couple statistics, if I may, and I'd like to get your opinion on them. So this one is one of my favorites. Let's see if we get to this. Here we go. All right, let me ask you about a couple statistics here, just to get your opinion. Okay, so in the Sabato Crystal Ball, University of Virginia Center for Politics, Sabato Crystal Ball did a survey between Biden and Trump voters, and they did this in September 30th, 2021. 80% of Biden voters and 84% of Trump voters feel elected officials from the other party are a clear and present danger to the USA. 74% of Biden voters, 78% of Trump voters feel all voters from the other party are a clear and present danger to the USA. Good sign, bad sign? We'll get past this. We'll see better days, or oh my God.
I'm not shocked by those numbers. I don't know if you saw Tucker Carlson had a gentleman on the other night, a week or two ago, where he said that he actually called for a national divorce, and they basically shut down Tucker's show about the moment that he did that and went straight to commercial.
Jason Whitlock.
Yeah,
outright
amazing.
Jason saying, "Let's have this divorce."
Yeah, he was saying, because he said, I'm sorry, I'm a Christian. I cannot connect with some of the stuff these guys are pushing, and pretty adamant he's not going to join it. So I think that's the first time I heard national divorce, but it's out. That made the mainstream media, and I'm not sure about the left if anybody shared that on the mainstream or not. I don't know.
From what I've seen. It seems to be known on the right, but it seems to be widely known on the right. Tucker Carlson's seen as sort of a straight shooter, and for whatever reason, his interview with that man to be cut short and go into commercial is anti-Tucker narrative is the impression that I'm getting from conservatives that I know. They're like, that would never happen on Tucker. What? So it seems to cause even more attention because he's seen as a shooter, and they're like, well, did you do that? Did your execs do that? And whatever. Does this get better? We're talking about 4/5, 80% of all voters on both sides feel the other side is a clear and present danger. And for the viewers, clear and present danger is typically the language we use for watch out, there's going to be an Al Qaeda nuclear attack or Russia showing up at our shores with gunboats. Now we're using it to talk about the other side. Can we actually reduce the polarization when it's at the 80% level on both parties?
Well, it seems pretty dire, doesn't it?
I'm only here to ask questions with the experts and see what you guys think.
Yeah.
Let me show you a few others if I can. That's the poll itself. Oh, this is one of my favorites. So it's called The Big Sort. People have been dividing into red and blue communities based upon politics. This was documented in 2008. There was a book called The Big Sort where a sociologist documented people are leaving and going to ideological like-minded communities. They talked about in 2008. They also talked about in 2022. The trend has continued for over the last 10 to 15 years. And here's basically the result covered by the New York Times. So if you look at the map in 1992, red equals don't even run here if you're not a Republican, you have no chance. Blue equals don't even run here if you're not a Democrat, you have no chance. Gray equals we're kind of open to both Republicans and Democrats. It's competitive. And so now we can see you can go from 1992 to 2016. Almost all the gray has been wiped out in all of America, and it's almost all hardcore red or hardcore blue. We've literally lost our ability to have competitive elections in about 80% of America over the last 2 to 3 decades. That's a long-term trend. Here's another one that I like. These are other organizations pointing out all this has gone on. Here's one of my favorite ones. This is from the Wall Street Journal, and this came out in 2020. But they were talking about, you have to go back to 1974. In 1974, 45% of Republicans identified themselves as hardcore conservatives. Now it's 76%. In 1974, only 28% of Democrats called themselves hardcore liberals. Now it's 59%. We've gone from under half to 2/3 in both parties, or basically doubling the amount of I'll never consider someone else from the other party. This trend goes back easily to 1976. It's kind of a plateau. You can really see a pickup around the 90s of polarization with a steady incline all the way to 2016. Given this trend goes back to the early 90s, how do we fix this? Because that's way before cancel culture. That's way before the rise of social media. This goes back to the 90s. And I see a lot of people go, well, we just get rid of social media and it goes away. And I go, okay, then why were they dividing in the 90s, in the early 2000s? I have yet to get an explanation. How do we fix these trends that are 3 decades old?
Well, it's fascinating, but do we need to?
Okay, so great answer. Great answer.
I mean, there's some, with Whitlock, I said, I'm sorry, I cannot reconcile my beliefs, my Christian beliefs or whatever with some of the stuff's going on. I'm just not there. So, it's like, throughout history, there's certain characters throughout history that were really evil people. I can't really consider how I could easily, reconcile with some of these characters. So sometimes, it's healthy maybe not to. I don't know here, or is the issue that our politicians are more diverse politically than they have been in the past? I mean, we're not. I don't think we ever saw the far left today. Some of the things that they're pushing today, I can't imagine that Democrats back in 1972 or whenever this started would really go along with this,
or even the 1990s. If you took the platform of the left and go back to the 1990s and go, hey guys, this is where it's going. I don't know that William Jefferson Clinton would have signed on to that.
No, he wouldn't have got elected.
Right. If he did, right, Americans would have rejected him. So clearly there's a shift. I'll also point out it's an old trope, but Ronald Reagan would never be elected today by conservatives. JFK would never be elected today by liberals. JFK would be considered a war hawk, and Ronald Reagan would be considered an alt-right lefty because of supporting, I think, reparations and the Environmental Protection Agency at one point. Yes, they were harbingers, but you can see how political opinions shift over time. If we don't fix this, do we get to where we have to have a national divorce? Because if the trend line's going up and we don't fix this, and it's going to keep going up to some point where we're 100% divided, that can't be good, considering the amount of unrest and distrust and anger that we're already experiencing with this level of division. I can only imagine if it gets worse. Where do we go if we don't heal the division? What are the options?
Yeah, well, I know one option is going on right now in the state that you're in, California. So there's a group of people that call themselves the New California Movement. And what they've done, I don't know if you're aware of this group or not.
I am, yes.
And so what they've decided is we're going to create a new state. We're going to call it New California. It's going to be the more red areas like where you're at. And I mean, because they feel like they've lost their voice in the state, the way things are right now. The big cities are, running the state, and these guys don't feel like they have a voice. So they're using the West Virginia model from the Civil War, where West Virginians decided, hey, we're not gonna side with the lunacy of what they thought at the time of the Confederate government, and we want to stay with the northern states. And they created their new state, and there's a constitutional process that they went through. And my understanding, that's what's going on right now with this New California group. They're attempting to do the same thing, use that model to create the 51st state, not separate from the Union, but separate from the big cities in the big metropolitan areas in their state that they don't believe are really running the state the way that they'd even consider running it.
And so maybe splitting states between liberal and conservative might be a way to keep the peace. To totally back up what you were saying, Kentucky was split off from Virginia in 1792, Maine from Massachusetts 1820, West Virginia from Virginia 1863, Vermont from New York in 1790. Some people could argue about Kentucky from North Carolina 1796. So we do have legal precedent of splitting states up, not overturned. We have 4 examples. Totally legal, totally constitutional. We know how to do it. It was done by the founders. This is totally available. Why then do I see in the media Marjorie Taylor Greene comes on and says we might need a national divorce, and I've seen conservatives and liberals say this is a stupid idea, let's not discuss this, how could you even split states apart? And I found that really bizarre because we've already done it 5 times in history, and yet of the 30 articles that I read who are questioning Marjorie Taylor Greene's reasonability, not one of them could mention we've had 4 or 5 states already split off from each other. How did 30 different reporters accidentally not mention a basic part of American history while being incredulous about Marjorie Taylor Greene's proposal?
That's a great question. And maybe they just lack the history. I don't know, quite frankly, if I would have known before I talked to some of these individuals at New California, that their proposal and really thought about it, said, wow, that's right, West Virginia did that. And so maybe they're just not aware. But I guess.
I do want to back up what you're saying, though. A lot of people said, oh, you could never split up California. It's purple. There's more Trump supporters there than other states. And I go, true, but you got to recognize the reality. There's 2 types of Trump supporters in California, or hardcore conservatives. They're the ones in the red, which is the New California area. That's where conservatives typically win elections against liberals year after year. All of the blue is where liberals basically win elections against conservatives. Yes, that includes Orange County and San Diego. A lot of conservatives don't like to hear that. I remember I had to inform Wayne Allen Root about that. He was like, no, people tell me this. And I go, look at the last 3 elections. They didn't win. But we could divide. And for the conservatives that are in San Francisco and LA, my stepdad voted for Trump based upon taxes. He doesn't like taxes and regulation in California, but he's married to my mom. His daughters are here and his business is here. He's never going anywhere. And he's also outnumbered by liberals. Wouldn't it be easy to split California into red and blue? I mean, the area where conservatives always win versus the areas where liberals always win, it seems to be a nice even split down the middle.
Well, the new California group's even more, there'd be more territory in red with
True.
really, they're just saying basically San Francisco, Sacramento, and LA areas broken off, the rest of the state pretty much red. They think that they can do that. So
they think that, but their map doesn't match the last 3 elections over the last 15 years. That's a fact. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying their map doesn't match elections. So just like I'm in Fresno. Right? If people go, Fresno is conservative. Actually, we voted Democrat the last 3 elections. Now, hold on. It was like 48-51, right? It's very slowly trending one way, but it is trending one way. Same thing with Orange County, San Diego. I don't see them basing that on that. But let me ask you another question, if I may. If we look at Georgia, Texas, Illinois, Illinois and Oregon, they're not purple. There's a blue metro area, and then 90% of the landmass is red. If you cut out the blue metro area, you've basically separated 90% of the blue from 90% of the red. Wouldn't that provide some peace, some stability, I don't have to be at your neck and fighting and arguing with you as much if maybe we split, red Oregon from blue Oregon and the Atlanta metro area from the 90% of Georgia that's conservative? Wouldn't this possibly be a way to reduce the tension and let people live in the areas they want?
Very possibly so. I think there are efforts right now for new Illinois, New York, and I've seen evidence out there in the Oregon counties in the west the east wanting to merge with Idaho. And even Washington. You've got a picture. I believe is that Washington or Oregon there?
It's Washington or Oregon. I'm sorry for everybody at home.
But it's similar. The big cities have these massive populations, and that always tend to go blue, and the rest of the state might be red. And so I think that's it. And that's what I hear from some of these people. It's about, having your voice heard. And if the government's set up such that, that you don't have that as a big group of people doesn't, then there's some alternatives that they're looking at. I think that's the whole just behind the New Mexico or the new California movement. So
and that's they're absolutely So this would never work in Ohio. So I've showed these maps to about 20 different professors, and they're like, yeah, maybe, but not Ohio. Ohio is legitimately equal-sized myriad of conservative and liberal cities. Okay, it wouldn't work there. But we aren't even looking at these states where it could work. A lot of states have the liberal core, and then the rest is conservative. I already showed 4. This is at least something that could work for a variety of states. Maybe not all of them. I've heard this will never work in Ohio. It's legitimately purple. But I also think a lot of people are saying states are purple when they're not. There's a metro center that's blue, and the entire rest of the state is red. That's not purple. That's an even shade of liberals and conservatives living.
Yeah. You showed that in one of your charts there, the U.S. map of the U.S. Some of these recent elections, you can see that. It's the big cities, and then it's the rest of the country that's red. And really every election lately. So, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Let me ask you what I always ask the guests. Is there a last-minute thought? So picture somebody watches this interview. It's about an hour. They remember parts, but 5 days from now, they're going, I saw this interview and I remember parts of it, but there was this one thing this guy said at the end, and I just can't get it out of my head. It's 5 days later. They remember nothing, but there's this one sticky viral thought that you left them with. What would that be?
Well, I was just on another interview here just moments ago, and we left it with, I really believe that that we're blessed, that God's in charge, that ultimately good things are going to come out of all this, and there's many blessings ahead. And if we need to continue to stand up for the truth, and stay real close right now at this period of time, especially I think to those in my situation, Christian values and beliefs, and just really deep faith that in my opinion, this country was really blessed from the start. You look at history of the world, and you look at this country, and I don't know how you can come up with any other conclusion. And it's had its challenges, and right now it's going through some challenges as well. I think real big challenges. But I think ultimately, if we stay close to our faith, we will make it through this period of time.
Thank you. I'm going to email you the copy of the show. I'd like you to
Great.
think about any recommendations. We're trying to have an honest conversation here. If you know anybody who's a thinker, can form complete sentences, be thoughtful, and would be willing to be part of the conversation, please think about that. You don't have to say publicly. I'll email you, but if you have any names, we'd love to talk to them.
Great. Thank you.
All right. I'll email you in a couple hours. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate this.
God bless. Take care.
Take care.